The church was silent until judgment echoed louder than the organ. "Leave! Now!" Rachel stood frozen, clutching a small yellow box. All she had left for the daughter they took. One cruel voice, one designer heel, and in a single stomp, even that was destroyed. Her gift crushed, her dignity shattered. Dozens watched. No one moved, not even the man who once promised to protect her. She only wanted to see her daughter, just once, until a man she once fed 10 years ago picked up the broken rattle and said, "You didn't step on that because it was worthless. You stepped on it because your heart is." That moment changed everything. And what happened next? You won't believe. The heavy church doors creaked open as Rachel Monroe stepped inside, her heart pounding beneath her plain cream dress. She clutched a small yellow-wrapped box to her chest, carefully tied with a ribbon, trembling slightly in her hands. Her eyes immediately searched for one person, Emily. Her daughter stood at the altar in a white christening gown, giggling, completely unaware her mother had just entered from the back. Rachel hadn't seen her in over a year, not since the court ruling that tore her away. She didn't come to make a scene. She didn't come to fight for custody. She just wanted to see her child, even from a distance. Then the silence was split by a voice sharp as broken glass. "You do not belong here." The words echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Vivian Kingsley, Rachel's former mother-in-law, rose from the front pew. Her heels clicked with authority as she turned to face the aisle. Her pearls gleamed in the soft candlelight, but her eyes were colder than stone. "You lost your right to be here the day you lost custody," she continued, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a sacred day for family, not for discarded mistakes like you." Rachel froze. Her face burned with humiliation. People turned to look. Some whispered. Some looked away. No one said a word. Not even Nathan, her ex-husband, who stood at the altar beside his new wife, expressionless. I just wanted to see her," Rachel stammered. "I brought her a small gift." Vivian's expression curled with disgust. "You were warned not to come." A uniformed security guard appeared beside her. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave." Rachel backed away. "Please, just after the ceremony, I promise." "I'm sorry," the guard said, reaching for her arm. "Don't touch me," she whispered, panic rising. In the scuffle, the box slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor, landing softly at Vivian's feet. Vivian didn't hesitate. With a calculated step, she crushed it beneath her heel. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the church. The yellow wrapping tore open, revealing a hand-carved wooden rattle. Emily's name etched into the handle, now broken in two. Gasps rose, but again, no one moved. Vivian looked down and sneered, "Just like you, cheap, broken, and unwanted." Rachel bent down trembling and picked up the pieces with shaking fingers. Her chest tightened, her vision blurred. The guard gently led her toward the doors. She didn't resist. The doors groaned shut behind her with finality. Outside, the wind tugged at her dress as she collapsed onto the stone steps. Alone, uninvited, unseen. Inside, laughter echoed. Emily's laughter. And no one had stood up for her. Not Nathan, not the priest, not a single soul. Rachel sat on the stone steps outside the church, her fingers wrapped around the splintered pieces of the rattle. The name Emily was still faintly visible, burned into the wood, but now cracked, like her heart. She didn't cry. Not yet. There was something heavier pressing against her chest. A numb ache, a growing sense that she had disappeared from the world entirely. Then a shadow fell across her lap. Polished black shoes appeared beside her. A quiet, calm voice followed. "That was a cruel thing to do." Rachel slowly looked up, squinting against the sunlight. A tall man stood before her, well-dressed in a black tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair swept neatly back. He looked to be in his mid-50s, commanding yet gentle. His eyes, gray and steady, weren't filled with pity, but with something deeper. Recognition. Resolve. Before she could speak, he stepped past her and into the church's open doorway. Inside, the congregation had begun murmuring again, unsettled by the earlier spectacle. Vivian was still standing near the crushed gift, her chin raised in triumph. But the man ignored the crowd. He bent slowly, retrieving the broken rattle from the stone floor. With care, he dusted it off with a white handkerchief, as though it were sacred. Then, standing tall and calm, he turned to face Vivian. "You didn't step on this because it was worthless," he said, his voice low but clear. "You stepped on it because your heart is—" Gasps rippled through the pews. The organist fell silent. A priest near the altar shifted nervously. Vivian's face flushed crimson. "Who are you?" she snapped. The man's gaze didn't waver. "My name is Gabriel Hartman. I'm a businessman. Some call me a philanthropist. But none of that matters today." He paused, then gestured toward the doors. "Today I'm a man who cannot stand by and watch cruelty masquerade as dignity." People were rising now, watching, listening. Gabriel looked toward Rachel, who was still seated just outside, one hand on her lap, the other gripping a piece of the rattle like a lifeline. "May I help you up?" he asked gently. Rachel blinked, unsure whether this was real. Slowly, almost involuntarily, she extended her hand. His was warm, steady. He lifted her with ease, as though she hadn't been crushed just moments earlier. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. He nodded once. Then, facing the stunned congregation, he spoke again. 10 years ago, I was homeless. No food, no shelter, no hope. I was invisible. But this woman, Rachel, saw me. She gave me her only meal and a note that said, 'Wishing you a warmer tomorrow.'" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, yellowed with time. "I carried this in my jacket through every cold night, and when I finally rebuilt my life, I swore that if I ever found the person who believed in me when no one else did, I'd never let them feel invisible again." The room was silent. "And today," he turned back to Vivian, his voice firmer now, "you took a mother's love and tried to crush it in front of her child. You talk about family, but what you practice is exclusion." Vivian opened her mouth, but no words came. Her power had always lived in silence, in people too afraid to speak, but not today. Gabriel extended his arm to Rachel once more. "You deserve to be inside. You deserve to see your child." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, not from shame this time, but from something she hadn't felt in years: dignity. Together, arm in arm, they walked back toward the sanctuary, while the world watched. The sun was beginning to dip below the rooftops as Gabriel's car turned into a quiet street lined with cherry trees. Rachel sat silently in the passenger seat, still clutching the broken rattle in her lap. She hadn't said much since they left the church. She couldn't. Her throat ached from holding back emotion, and her body felt like it had endured a storm. Gabriel didn't push her to speak. He simply drove in silence, occasionally glancing over to ensure she was okay. The car pulled up outside a modest red brick building nestled between two small parks. String lights twinkled gently over the entrance, and a hand-carved wooden sign read, "Hartman Commons, a place to begin again." Gabriel stepped out first and opened the passenger door. "Just for tonight," he said gently. "No expectations. Just a warm bed, a safe space." Rachel hesitated. She had no idea who this man really was. Not anymore. But he had stood for her when no one else had. And that had to mean something. She nodded and followed him inside. The apartment was small but comforting. Soft, lavender-scented air drifted in from an open window. Pale curtains swayed gently. The living room held a cozy couch, a bookshelf full of novels, and a vase of daisies on the table. Warm light wrapped the space like a blanket. Gabriel showed her the guest room. "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need." Rachel stepped inside and froze. Against the wall stood a twin bed, made up with floral sheets and a handmade quilt. On the desk, a box of colored pencils and a sketch pad. A moon-shaped nightlight glowed faintly in the corner beside his soft lamb plushie. It wasn't just a guest room. It was a child's room. Emily's room. Her knees nearly gave out. You did this?" she asked, her voice catching. Gabriel leaned on the doorway and gave a small smile. "I thought maybe someday she'd want to visit, and if she did, I wanted her to feel like she belonged." Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth. No one had thought of Emily's heart like that since the custody battle. No one except her, and now, him. That night, after a shower and a borrowed sweatshirt, She sat at the tiny kitchen table sipping tea Gabriel had prepared. He didn't talk much, just sat with her, quietly reading a book. And in that silence, she felt something unfamiliar. Peace. The next morning, she found a folded note beside her teacup, written in a neat, slightly slanted hand. Today is yours. Take it gently. You're more than what they said you were. She read it twice before tucking it carefully into her pocket. Each morning afterward, a new note appeared. You're doing better than you think. Emily is lucky to have a mom who never gave up. You are not invisible. And slowly, piece by piece, something inside Rachel began to mend. She started helping around the apartment, cooking, watering the plants. She even found herself laughing once when Gabriel brought back two parenting books from the library and sheepishly admitted, I asked the librarian what a man should read if he wanted to understand little girls. Rachel chuckled, touched beyond words. They never spoke directly of what had happened at the church, or the trial, or Emily. Not yet. It was as if they were both learning how to breathe again in each other's quiet presence. One evening, Rachel walked past the bookshelf and noticed something wedged between the novels. A small photo frame. Inside was a note, her note, the one she gave Gabriel 10 years ago when he was cold, hungry, and forgotten. Wishing you a warmer tomorrow. Her breath caught. It had faded, yellowed, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. Gabriel walked in, catching her stare. He didn't say anything, just gave her a knowing smile. And that was the moment Rachel understood. This wasn't charity. This wasn't obligation. This was a man repaying love with love. No grand declarations, no pity, only the quiet truth. Someone finally saw her and believed in her again. It began with a folder. One morning, Gabriel entered the kitchen holding a thick manila file. His expression was calm, but his eyes were heavy with something deeper, urgency. He placed it gently in front of Rachel as she sat at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of tea. I need you to see this, he said quietly. Rachel set her cup down, her fingers already trembling. Inside were papers, dozens of them, typed notes, emails, bank records, medical evaluations. Some pages looked familiar, fragments of the psychiatric report that had been used against her in court. What is this? She asked, voice tight. Gabriel sat beside her. Julia found something, he said, referring to his longtime attorney, Julia Ramirez. The psychiatric report that helped strip you of custody, it was falsified. Rachel's stomach twisted. It was written by Dr. Carson Wilkes, but Julia traced a series of payments made to a consulting firm that doesn't exist, one tied to your ex-father-in-law's financial network. The paper trail is undeniable. He paid off Wilkes to label you as unstable. Rachel stared at the documents. She couldn't breathe. They bought the diagnosis? Gabriel nodded slowly. They stole your daughter using a lie. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. Rage had no room to move through the disbelief. Only silence. Julia's filed a motion to reopen the case, Gabriel added. She's bringing in a new psychologist, one we trust, someone who will see the truth. For a long time, Rachel didn't speak. She just stared down at the stack of papers that contained everything she'd always known in her heart, but never had the power to prove. 2 weeks later, Rachel sat in a quiet, sunlit office, facing Dr. Leland Moore, a soft-spoken psychologist with kind eyes. She answered every question with honesty, even the hard ones. Her past struggles with anxiety, the trauma of the custody battle, the loneliness that came afterward. And when it was done, he leaned forward and said, You're not unstable, Miss Monroe. You're a mother who's endured unthinkable pain and stayed standing. A week later, they were in court. Gabriel sat beside her, not as her lawyer or protector, but as her anchor. Across the aisle, Nathan sat stiffly with Vivian, their lawyer whispering into their ears. Nathan couldn't meet her gaze. Vivian didn't even try. When Judge Kellerman entered, the room fell silent. Julia Ramirez stood first. Your Honor, we submit that the original custody ruling was based on fraudulent medical documentation, paid for by the plaintiff's father. We have proof of financial misconduct, misrepresentation of mental health, and deliberate obstruction of justice. She laid out the bank transfers, the fake firm, the shell company. And finally, Dr. Wilkes's sudden resignation when contacted for testimony. Then came Dr. Moore's testimony. Rachel Monroe is emotionally stable, responsible, and most of all, deeply bonded with her child. The trauma she's endured only reinforces her resilience. Finally, the judge turned to Rachel. "Would you like to speak, Ms. Monroe?" Rachel stood slowly. Her voice didn't shake this time. "Nathan," she said, looking directly at her ex, "you promised to protect me. Instead, you let your family destroy me. You watched them take Emily and said nothing." Then she turned to the bench. "I'm not perfect, but I'm a mother, and no amount of money should have silenced that truth. I love my daughter, and I will never stop fighting for her." The courtroom was still. The judge looked over the evidence one last time, then spoke. "This court acknowledges the fraudulent nature of the original ruling. Ms. Monroe is hereby granted immediate supervised visitation. A full custody review is scheduled." Rachel exhaled slowly, for the first time in what felt like years. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters called her name, cameras flashing, but all she saw was Gabriel, steady as ever. "You gave me the strength," she whispered. "No," he said, placing a hand on her back. "You had it all along. I just reminded you." The park was alive with the sound of laughter. Balloons swayed in the summer breeze, ribbons danced between the trees, and a bright banner fluttered above the picnic tables. Emily's first birthday with Mom. Children ran barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles and butterflies, while parents gathered near the lemonade table, chatting over cupcakes and sandwiches. A string quartet played soft melodies under a gazebo. Even a local news van parked quietly in the distance, capturing the warmth of the day without intruding. Rachel stood near the center of it all, wearing a light yellow sundress, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. Her eyes never strayed far from Emily, who wore a flower crown and a frosting-stained smile as she tried to open a gift bigger than she was. Rachel turned to Gabriel, standing beside her in a linen blazer and open-collar shirt. "You did all this?" she asked quietly. He gave a modest shrug. "For her," he said, "and for you. The world should see what love really looks like." She blinked back tears. This was the kind of day she thought she'd never have again. Full of light, community, and most of all, presence. She wasn't watching from a distance. She was in it, a mother once more. As the sun began to dip, Rachel stepped onto a small platform near the food table. The music faded, the children quieted, parents turned to listen. "I just want to say thank you," she began, her voice clear and calm. "Not just to Gabriel, who gave us this day, but to all of you, for showing up, for believing that every child deserves their mother and every mother deserves a chance to be seen." Applause rose around her, genuine, unforced. Then just as she began to step down, she noticed two figures standing beyond the park's entrance, Nathan and Vivian. They stood at the edge of the grass like ghosts from another life, still, uncertain, uncomfortable. Nathan held a small gift bag in both hands. Vivian's posture was tight, her expression unreadable. The crowd went silent. Rachel held her breath as they slowly approached. Nathan spoke first, his voice low but audible. "We came to say something we should have said a long time ago." Vivian looked up, her voice shaking. "We were wrong," she said. "I was wrong." Rachel stood still, heart pounding. For a moment, no one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then she stepped down and walked toward them. She looked at Nathan. "I never thought I'd hear that." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want Emily to know that her mother never gave up on her." Vivian added, her voice cracking, "I hope one day you'll let us try to make amends." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with calm clarity. "I forgive you." A pause. "But I won't forget." Vivian lowered her eyes, tears glistening. "Because through that pain," Rachel continued, "I found something I never had before. I found people who love without conditions, who stand by me not because they have to, but because they choose to." And with that, she turned and walked back to the heart of the celebration. Emily came running into her arms, squealing with frosting on her cheeks. Rachel scooped her up, laughing, and planted a kiss on her forehead. Gabriel approached, offering a napkin. She took it with a smile. As the music returned and children danced in the grass, Rachel stood in the golden light, no longer an outsider, no longer broken. She was a mother restored. She was a woman whole. She was home. The scent of cinnamon and warm vanilla drifted down the corner of Willow and Main, drawing passers-by toward a small bakery with a hand-painted sign above the door. Rachel's Hearth, where every story starts sweet. Inside, trays of golden croissants, lemon bars, and freshly iced cookies lined the counter. But the heart of the bakery wasn't in the display case. It was in the back room, where flour dust hung in the air like confetti, and the laughter of children bounced off the tiled walls. Rachel stood at a long wooden counter, apron dusted with flour, guiding a group of wide-eyed children through their first lesson in braiding challah. Most came from local shelters or struggling homes. Some had never cracked an egg before, but here they were safe, trusted, encouraged. The program she'd built, Sweet Starts, offered free weekend baking classes for low-income children. It wasn't just about food, it was about dignity. And always by her side, handing out aprons or rinsing mixing bowls, was Emily, now older, still full of giggles and flour-covered fingers. Rachel watched her with quiet pride. Gabriel was never far. He never demanded attention or praise. He repaired shelves when they broke, stocked flour before it ran out, and often sat at the same corner table each morning, book in one hand, coffee in the other, presence unwavering. He had purchased the building quietly, but he insisted, "This is your dream. I just made sure it had a front door." Some days when the bakery emptied and only the glow of the string lights remained, Rachel would sit by the window, tea in hand, watching Emily do homework while Gabriel swept the floor. And in those quiet moments, she would smile, not because everything was perfect, but because she had built something from the ashes, a life, a space, a future. Rachel's Hearth wasn't just a bakery, it was a home for second chances, and within its warm walls, something long lost had finally returned to her. Hope. The park was quiet that afternoon, wrapped in the golden hush of early spring. Cherry blossoms drifted gently from the trees, carried by a soft breeze that played with the hem of Rachel's dress. She sat on a weathered bench beside Gabriel, their hands loosely intertwined. Across the field, Emily twirled beneath the falling petals, her laughter floating through the air like a song. In one hand, she clutched a paper bag filled with cookies from the bakery. In the other, a daisy she'd picked for no reason other than joy. Rachel's gaze lingered on her daughter, then drifted down to the soft space between her and Gabriel. She hadn't said it aloud, not yet, but she knew what this was. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was something steadier, warmer, grown from moments, not miracles. She exhaled softly. "I used to sit here alone," she murmured. "Back when I couldn't see Emily. I'd watch other families pass by and wonder if I'd ever belong anywhere again." Gabriel didn't respond right away. He let the silence hold the weight of the memory. Then he looked at her with eyes full of quiet certainty. "And now?" he asked. She gave a shaky smile, eyes glistening. "Now, sometimes I wonder how I could possibly deserve this kind of love." Gabriel reached across and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, grounding. "Because you've always seen the worth in others," he said. "And now, finally, someone sees the worth in you." Rachel blinked back tears, not of sadness, not even of joy, but of release. Emily ran over then, cheeks flushed and hands sticky with frosting. She climbed into Rachel's lap without hesitation. "I saved the last cookie for you, Mommy," she announced proudly. Rachel laughed, kissing her daughter's forehead as Gabriel leaned in and kissed the top of Emily's head too. And in that moment, under a canopy of blossoms, no one said the word family. But they didn't have to. It was already written in every glance, every gesture, every shared silence. Sometimes the greatest loves grow not in fireworks, but in the quiet strength of being seen. In a world that often rushes to judge, this story reminds us of something timeless. Everyone deserves a second chance, and the chance to be seen. Rachel Monroe was cast out, not for failing as a mother, but because others chose to define her worth by status, not heart. And yet, through quiet strength and an unexpected ally, she reclaimed her voice and her child. Gabriel didn't save her because she asked. He stood up because she once fed him when he had nothing and didn't look away. In today's society, especially here in America, where single parents, working mothers, and the homeless are often overlooked, this story asks, how often do we step over someone who might one day lift us up? And more importantly, when we see injustice, do we stay silent or do we speak? The warmth of this story doesn't lie in dramatic rescue, but in steady compassion. From a hand on a church step, to a child's room prepared without promise, to a note that said, "Today is yours. Take it gently." We invite you to reflect. Have you ever helped someone without knowing how much it would mean? Or has someone ever stood up for you when the world turned away? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Warm Soul Stories for more real tales of redemption, love, and the quiet courage it takes to start again. Because sometimes the softest voices carry the most powerful truth, and sometimes the family we choose is the one that saves us.